This lesson is utilizing Handlebars.js for templating lists and tables. The objectives for this lesson are to implement looping helpers to iterate through an array of data, generate an HTML select list, construct an unordered list, build an HTML table, and create a script for standard data formatting Handlebars helpers. You're going to use the each helper to iterate over a collection, and then you do whatever you want to do between the #each and the /each. So these are for arrays or collections of data. Handlebars iterates over each row in the array collection, and the template within the each helper is repeated for each row. Let's take a look at templating an HTML select list using Handlebars. In this HTML page, on line 18, I have a select that has an ID of movies. So what we want to do is build an option that goes in between that select for each element in our array. So in our template, you can see the #each, so that's our each helper, and it's saying I'm going to be iterating over a property called movie list. So that movie list needs to be a property in your object literal that has an array. Then each one of those rows in the array is going to have a film ID property and a name property, because you can now see those within the curly braces. And it's just going to build an option for each one of those. So we come down here, I've got this let viewModel VM equal to, it's an object literal. It has a single property called movie list. That, as you can see, is an array, and that array is an object literal of 3 movie items, and they each have a film ID and a name. Now, after that, if we take a look at the code down here on lines 61 through 68, it's the exact same code we've always seen. So let's go ahead and run this, and what we get is a select with these different options here. So we saw where you have an array of object literals, but what if you have a primitive array, like an array of strings? So now there's no property name that we can bind to. Well, for that, we simply use a tag with a period in it. That period represents each element within the primitive data type array. Let's take this concept and apply it to build an unordered list. In this HTML on line 18, you can see I have an unordered list. That's empty, of course. Lines 24 through 29 are my template. And in the template, I've got a #each, so I'm using the each helper again. Movie list, so I'm looking for an array of movie names. I've got a comment just to say what we're doing, but the key on this one is for each list item, I'm going to use my tag with a single period in it, and that simply represents each element in the array. We look down here in my window.onload function. You can see on line 39, I build a viewModel object that has a single property called movie list, and that movie list has an array of strings. So there's my primitive data array. The dot represents each element as it iterates over this and puts those values into the list item. The rest of the code, exactly the same. Let's go ahead and run this, and we should see now our unordered list built using Handlebars. In the last lesson, we created a helper, our own custom helper, but let's now put all these helpers inside of our own script file. So we're going to create a new script file called Handlebars-helpers, and we're going to add all of our register helper functions in there. That way we can reuse this script over and over again, and we can just add it to any page where we need to use these helpers. So let's take a look at creating a Handlebars helper script. So you can see under the scripts folder, I've got this Handlebars-helpers.js, and inside of here, I've got a couple of helpers. I've got a US currency one, that's the one we saw before in the last lesson. And then I've got another one called runtime. And what I have in some JavaScript I'm going to show you in a minute, I've got minutes of runtime for a movie. So if it's 120 minutes, I want it basically to report it out as 2 hours and N minutes. And that's what this next register helper does, this runtime one. It figures that out of how many hours and minutes, and it will return that, as you can see, as a string. I'm using a template literal here. Now, where we're going to use these register helpers is in building an HTML table using movie data that has a price for the currency, it has the runtime, so we're going to use both of those. So let's take a look at templating an HTML table. In this HTML file, we can see on lines 18 through 30 a table. it's got a T head and the TR, and then of course all the table headers. And then on line 29, it's got the T body, and that's where we're going to insert each of our rows. If we take a look at our template on lines 36 through 53, you can see first off, we're checking to see #if movie list. So does movie list even have some data in it? And then down in line 48, it has an else that does a TR with a column span that says no movies available. So if there's no movies in our movie list, we're actually going to show no movies are available in that first row. Otherwise, if the movie does have data, we're going to use a #each. So I'm going to do a #each, that's the each helper on movie list, iterate over each row in that movie list, and I'm going to have a bunch of data. So like I've got the name, I've got the actors, I've got the genres, and then here's where I'm going to use one of those helpers, that runtime helper. I'm going to pass in runtime in minutes. So that's a property in the object literals I'm going to show you here in just a second. It also has a release date. And then also I'm going to use my US currency on the price. All of these guys here are going to line up to, I've got a class here called Movies.js. And in this class, I've got a method called getAll. And you can see it's got a list of all of these different movie objects here. And they each have like that runtime in minutes, like I talked about. Has a release date, has a price, a rating. So I've got just a few here that I'm going to use. All right, so now on this table.html file that I've got, look at my scripts. I've got the handlebars. Make sure you bring that in first before you bring in your handlebars-helpers, okay, because that's where you're registering things. So handlebars has to be loaded first. I've also got the common.js, so I can use that to currency. And then you can see under classes, I've got my movies.js, so I'm including that one as well. So if we look at our window.onload function, first off, I'm going to create an instance of the class. I'm going to load all the movies into the movie list property. So entity.getAll. So entity now has a movie list property that you can see right here on line 6, right? So there's a get movie list, return this.poundList, because poundList is a private. All right, so now that I've got that, if I go back over here and I've done a getAll, that means I can create my view model object now with the movie list property, and I can assign it to the entity.movieList. So that's the array of movie objects. After that, the code's pretty much the same again, isn't it? Get the template inner HTML, compile that with handlebars, pass my view model to the template function, which then returns that whole list of TRs and TDs that I can then put into the tbody inner HTML. Let's take a look. And there we go. So we can see each row got built. Look at the runtime. Okay, you saw in the object literal, the runtime was like at 109 or 20 whatever minutes, but I switched it all to hours and minutes. And also look at the rental price. The rental price has the $sign in front of it because this is in US currency now. In this lesson, we used looping helpers to iterate over arrays of data. So we iterated over movie data and we created a select list, we created an unordered list, we created an HTML table, and we also created a handlebars helper script. I think you can see how handlebars is going to be very, very helpful. In this module, we use string concatenation to build HTML. We use literal strings to build HTML. We learned to use the HTML template element. We used handlebars to dynamically generate HTML, and we even created our own custom handlebar helpers. So where do we go from here? Well, check out my From Zero to JavaScript Fetch API course that I have up there. Also coming soon are more From Zero to JavaScript modules, including templating, asynchronous programming, exception handling, array manipulation, set manipulation, data type methods, modules, DOM manipulation. So be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can keep up on all the latest modules I'm going to be releasing in this From Zero to JavaScript course.